But good evening, everyone. Good to see you here on this Saturday evening when, things around the world are crazy. But we really, really appreciate all of you coming in to join us for our first Date with Data. Quick introduction, I'm Supriya from Agami, and I have with me our co-creators, Gaurav from
Supriya, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can, Rangin. Can you hear us okay? Until he figures that out. Yeah, so, we, as most of you know, we have been working on Justice Hub for the last several months, and really excited to have launched the platform a few, late February this year. And the simple idea behind Justice Hub is really to sort of say, how do we leverage our own resources as a community, our resources, knowledge, information, data sets that we have, make them open, make them shareable so that we can almost build and grow this community of us who are working with data related tools to be able to improve and solve our problems of justice. So if you go on to Justice Hub, you'll see that people have shared for our alpha version, data sets on a range of themes from, e-courts to like, POSCO cases to death penalty to, crime, etc. And the idea is that, we know that mining and working with data and collecting data is often where most people spend their time rather than actually doing the analysis of it, which is where really the value add in a significant way is, and to say, how can we unlock the resources that we have as a community so that people who may or may not have had access to those resources to build that data can build upon them, expand them, and grow them, right? So one is the data set itself, but we all know that beyond the data sets, equally valuable is the knowledge that we learn about working with data, right? And each one in the community, and most of you, I'm guessing, have in some shape or form, from what I know, worked on it. You would have like learnings that come out of what is doable, what is not, what more is possible, what are the stories to be told. And today I'm really, really excited. And we see Justice Hub as being able to create that community of people who are able to share, learn from each other's experiences beyond just the data set. And in that context, I'm really happy to welcome Professor Rangin, who's based in Orissa and has been a very critical contributor to Justice Hub. He has a deep passion for issues around data, but particularly relating to how our institutions function, and to understanding better how courts and other institutions function. And he has shared with us on the hub, and which we'll talk with you a little bit more through today, around the data sets he's collected relating to how, the courts, Supreme Court judges are appointed and what that can tell us. So really lovely to have all of you in the room. Over to you, Rangin, to take over this conversation. This is an intimate group setting. So the idea, and I'm sure each of you have a slightly different context or way in which you might be looking at your interest in this theme. So please feel free to use the chat screen if you have questions in between. You would like him to clarify, treat this more like a conversation rather than a panel or a webinar that you're listening to. So yeah, please jump in wherever possible if you feel like you would like a clarification. The way we're thinking about this hour is Rangin will possibly share his thoughts and learnings for the first 15 minutes, but the rest would be more a discussion. So with that, Saurabh, do you just want to do the quick poll now, or we could do it in a bit?
Yeah, let's take like just a couple of minutes, and actually it will not even take like a couple of minutes. It's just like a very short poll, which you should be able to see on your screens now. This is just to get to know like the composition of this group. So, oh, awesome. So we are actually quite a mixed group of like journalists, researchers, lawyers, and others. Thank you so much for everyone who has polled here. Supriya, we can proceed, I think.
Rangin, over to you to kickstart and guide the conversation.
Thank you. So hello, everybody. Firstly, extremely sorry for the trouble and the fact that you have been waiting for almost 15 minutes now because of some trouble at my end. And thank you for your patience. Now, uh, as I had a chat with Supriya earlier, that I wanted to talk about the kind of research that I have been doing and how I have been relying on data to tell some stories about the judiciary in particular. And the fact that the data sets that you now find in Justice Hub, I have also contributed one data set, how that data set can be used to critique the system, to find interesting perspectives about the system, and how what we can derive from the numbers. The data sets are primarily just numbers, but all these numbers have some insight about the system, how the system is operating. So I think I would just like to start on that. So firstly, I'll talk a bit about the data set that I have contributed. I don't know if Supriya has briefed you on that. So the data set that I have contributed is background of Indian Supreme Court judges. So, and most of this data is actually very conveniently available, on Supreme Court website. Right? The data sets that I have relied on are primarily from the Supreme Court website. And what I was looking for to do is that the reason I use data is that I find it kind of makes it smoother to make a normative point when you have some data to back it up, right? No matter what we are saying, let's say we talk about nepotism in the judiciary or any other issue, when you can paint a picture about nepotism instead of just talking about the principle of nepotism or talking about it in abstract, I always find that it puts me in a better position to get the point across. So what I did is that the data on Supreme Court is notoriously scarce, as in we don't have a lot of data. So when I looked at the data that was available, for which I didn't have to make any request, I didn't have to file an RTA query, or I didn't have to give an official request and things like that, I found that we don't have a data on a lot of variables, right? You have like some basic data, but then I found that even with that basic data, there's a lot that we can do. So as an example, I'm just sharing this particular piece that I wrote on. Let me go to the chat box and share this piece. This piece came out a bit later, right? But so this piece came to my mind when the current union government objected to the appointment of Justice K.M. Joseph, who had given some judgments while he was in the Uttarakhand High Court, which the government was not very fond of. So in the letter that the Union Minister for Law and Justice wrote to the Collegium as to why they were stalling the appointment of Justice K.M. Joseph, they talked about how the Supreme Court does not have regional balance. That is, ideally, it's an unwritten understanding and unofficial policy that the Supreme Court should have judges from different states, that there should be an adequate balance. And they said that you already have a judge from Kerala, and that you should not, have another judge. And at that point of time, it struck me to, write this particular piece, because the Supreme Court, my data set now contains, and at that time I thought of just collecting data on the regional origin of all judges in the Supreme Court. And I just started a comparison about, so you have the date from which the Collegium started. So we have a bare understanding of which judges are appointed by the Collegium and which judges are appointed by the executive. You'll find that now coded in the data set as well. So I just started looking into whether the Collegium has actually pursued any policy of maintaining a regional balance or not, right? And as I said, the piece came out a bit later than when it was actually in the news spec. But this is just one example where I feel that even with basic data, right? Even the data which seems like very mundane and which seems like really boilerplate, right? You can highlight certain issues. So I was able to show that how some high courts are better represented in the Supreme Court than in comparison to some other high courts. I'll give an example with another piece that I wrote, which relied on a data set which has been uploaded by Nick Robinson. He has not actually uploaded the data set, but he has uploaded the research paper that he wrote on this. So in that, in this paper, you'll see that this was in the news spec when Venkaiah Naidu made some comments about the fact that we should have regional benches of Supreme Court. I had read Nick's paper earlier, and I found that he had presented a lot of data supporting this particular. He had not actually argued that there should be a regional benches established, but he had presented data as to how the filing figures from different states. So he has essentially shown that states which are nearer to Delhi access litigants from those states access Delhi more often than states which are farther from Delhi. So the rate of appeals which are filed against decisions from high courts are much lower from a state like Odisha than, let's say, from a state like Punjab and Haryana. So he had given this exhaustive analysis as to how over the years people who stay close to Delhi have had better access to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So because I had read that paper, it gave me an opening as to provide some kind of empirical justification for the proposal of having regional benches of the Supreme Court. And the more research I did on these things, even from simple things, you start coming out with a lot of interesting insights. So, for example, I learned that as we know that Supreme Court judges come from primarily two streams, right? High Court judges or lawyers who are directly made Supreme Court judges, right? But even High Court judges are again subdivided into two streams. High Court judges were in the subordinate judiciary and then became High Court judges, and High Court judges were earlier lawyers and then became High Court judges. So in the data set, I have maintained this distinction as HC service and HC bar. That is High Court judges who came from the bar and High Court judges who came from the judicial service. Now, here's the interesting thing, and this was unnoticed till I found that out, and I actually wrote a journal article on that under the executives, judges who served in the lower judiciary at any point of time in their life constituted almost 20% of the appointments, right? But under the collegium, that figure is only 3%. So what it effectively means is that in today's India, in the India since the collegium came into existence, the chances for a person joining the subordinate judiciary to reach the Supreme Court is virtually non-existent, right? Whereas earlier, every 1 in 5 judges was from the subordinate judiciary. So there was a clear path for somebody joining the judiciary. He or she could dream about becoming a Supreme Court judge at some point of time in their life. It was not that uncommon. Now it is positively rare for that to happen. So for me, that showed the extent to which lawyers have dominated the power structure within the collegium, right? So it's primarily lawyers who become judges who go to the Supreme Court. If you're in the subordinate judiciary, there is hardly any chance for you to do that. And there are some other data which you find which is hard to explain. Actually, those things perhaps require a bit of more separate perspectives of their own. For example, when the executive was appointing judges, more than 10% of judges resigned from their office, right? But when the collegium is appointing judges, that figure is at only 1.47%. That's like a huge difference. Only 1 or 2 judges have resigned, and that too primarily, you can count them by name. It was Dalbir Bhandari and Satendra Kumar, right? Who went on in their mind at least greener pastures, right? But I don't know the exact reason for it, but I found it really interesting that it might be interesting to examine that why so many judges were resigning earlier and why judges are not resigning today. Also, another interesting figure which came to my notice was that when the executive was appointing judges, more than 9% of judges died while they were in office. Right? When the collegium was appointing judges, that figure is less than 1%. Again, I don't know the exact reason for it, but I always think it might be interesting to speculate as to whether they have internally, without notifying it to the public, have developed some kind of standards about medical fitness, which is better than what it used to be, right? And that's something which I feel which can be, it may reveal an institutional practice which has changed, which has not been properly, notified, which has not been properly in public notice. And there are some other more controversial figures which come to mind when we look at the data set, which we can find from the data set, which I found. For example, I found that over a period of time, the southern states have lost out in terms of their influence in the Supreme Court. So under the collegium, the southern states had more appointees in the Supreme Court. Those appointees had longer tenure in the Supreme Court, but under the collegium that has reduced, right? In terms of individual states, there are winners and losers. For example, you'll find a state like Bombay continues to dominate the judicial landscape. We have more judges from Bombay in the Supreme Court than any other state. And those judges stay in the Supreme Court for much longer than judges from any other state. But after the collegium has come into picture, a state like Delhi, right? It has suddenly in the last, since 1987, right? So it started a couple of years before the collegium came into existence. But since then, till at least 2019, if I'm not wrong, there has not been a single day where there has not been a judge from Delhi High Court in the Supreme Court, right? Whereas states like Madras have lost out under the collegium, that is Madras and Allahabad prominently, and gains have been made for Patna and Delhi. So I really find it interesting how it's difficult to know exactly what are the factors behind these changes in power, in terms of influence. That's another issue altogether that the data doesn't tell you, but the data can tell you who has more influence at a particular point of time, right? So after the collegium has come, surely the high courts of Patna and Delhi have gained prominence, which they did not have earlier. And the high courts of Madras and Allahabad have lost prominence, right? And so, as I said, these are like very basic numbers, but there's a lot of interesting pieces that we can work on this. So this is one article that I found a couple of days ago, right? So this I don't know the author personally, right? But I find that this is a kind of piece which one can write relying on the kind of data that's available in the Justice Hub. So this author, in this case, Krishnadas Rajgopal, has analyzed how many judges from which states are already there in the Supreme Court, and based on that, what are the possible options in terms of appointees which the collegium has at present, right? Who are in contention, and he justifies that not by any gossip or not by anything else, but by looking at data that, okay, let's say X High Court already has 2 judges, so it's unlikely that the next appointee is going to be from that High Court. So it can be from some of the other high courts which have less appointees. So this is a kind of piece which can be, very simply be derived from the kind of data that we have. And there are a lot of possibilities with this data. For example, in the Justice Hub data, the data sets in the Justice Hub, there are a lot of data sets which are right now not yet correlated. Nobody has established the correlation, but there is scope to do so. For example, there is this data set on post-retirement jobs, right? Where we have data on which judge took what kind of post-retirement job after retirement. And you have data sets on the background of judges, right? Their gender, their professional background, which courts they're from, which high courts, which region they're from, and everything. And I imagine that it would be nice to examine, establish a correlation. Let's say, for example, I might be interested to know, I haven't done this work right now, but I might be interested to know, is there any variance in the extent to which male judges are offered jobs post-retirement compared to women judges, right? That whenever we talk about diversity or empowerment, we only talk about, the system, but even after the system, as in after they have been a judge and after they have reached out, they have retired, we can look into things like that, as in is there an imbalance in the opportunities that are given to male judges who retire comparison to women judges who retire, and that can be extended to other variables as well, right? Other identity variables as well. And the data set that I had, for example, that I've uploaded, I had written another piece on that about disclosure practice of Supreme Court judges. So I was looking into how much data judges share about themselves. So I did an entire piece on that as to the fact that if judges expect us to trust them, they have an obligation to tell us more about themselves. And I contrasted that with how these judges talk so much about the right of voters to know about the candidates so that they can take an informed choice. And they expect the public to trust these judges blindly without knowing much about them. So I just did an analysis of not the actual biography of judges, but how much the judges are willing to share about themselves. And you'll find that judges are so reluctant to tell us anything about themselves. The biographies are the way Supreme Court discloses data about its judges is really inconsistent. The best thing, not exactly the best thing, but Vineet Saran, he took office like a couple of years ago, right? Till 2018, if I'm not wrong. Till date, he doesn't have a biography in the Supreme Court website, right? So if a common man in India wants to know about the judges who decide so many important things about India, and he goes to the supposedly supposed to be the most authentic source, that is, you'll go to the official source. The official source is absolutely silent. So apart from Vineet Saran, there are 2 or 3 more judges who have been in the Supreme Court for years now, but their biographies, their profile page is completely blank, doesn't have any data, right? And but the data that is there's so many other possibilities that can happen. For example, one thing which had crossed my mind was to look into the educational background of judges. How many of the judges are from public schools and how many of them are from private schools, right? And because then it's something which can reveal the barriers which are operationally in existence within the judiciary in terms of reaching a particular position of authority, right? So there are a lot of things that we can derive if we just start looking at the data a bit more critically, right? And then many of these data sets actually can also be replicated, as in, for example, the kind of data set that you have on Supreme Court judges, it will not be that hard for that data set to be replicated for a particular state. So if, let's say, taking the cue from that data set, somebody just replicated that data for Maharashtra, or let's say Delhi, about how many judges are there from subordinate judiciary, how many judges are there from the bar, right? And whether there is professional homogeneity, right? The point that I was trying to make in my article then was that diversity should not simply be about identity, but also about your professional skills, right? We should not have a professionally homogeneous judiciary. Yeah, Supriya, thank you. I was going on a train of thought. So yeah, that's all for now. If anybody has any questions or anything, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Rangin, for walking us through both, how actually a lot of the data that you're talking about is just very basic data that's accessible on the courts. Of course, it's been put together in a more structured manner for analysis through your work and that of other contributors like Madhavani and Gyan. And what you have highlighted are some very critical questions, right, about how do we know how the collegium, the process of appointment is affected, who gets appointed, what the correlations between post-retirement jobs, whether around gender, caste, etc., can be explored. I would love to, I just wanted to also share, like you shared a lot, Madhavani, who is another contributor who also has created a data set that's on Justice Hub on the post-retirement jobs, like where they tracked for, I think, close to 100 judges, what kind of jobs did they take afterwards, and what that can mean, and I think like what Rangin already alluded, you can do a gender correlation. You can see whether people with higher citations get rewarded, or how do they tend to rule or judge in the last few years of their jobs based on that, like in government or anti-government cases. So so I think there's a lot of interesting work that's possible, but we would love to now open it up to all of you who are in the room to ask Rangin any clarifications, questions, or ideas you have, even in terms of what questions you might like to pursue. So yeah, over to anyone in the room who wants to share a reaction, thought, in any shape or form.
Hi, could I jump in?
Please do, Avanti.
Thanks so much.
You, Avanti, just quickly, anyone who's jumping, just quickly introduce yourself, and then it'll be good to, so that.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. So I'm Avanti Durrani. I'm the Assistant Director and a Junior Fellow at IDFC Institute. We're a Mumbai-based think tank, and one of our verticals is sort of access to justice and what that means for state capacity. So thank you so much for this talk. Actually, it was really fascinating, and this is something we're exploring as well. How do we get more data about the justice sector? While we focus on policing, judiciary is just a related concern of ours as well. I sort of I don't have an answer to this, so I was sort of just wanted to pick your brains on this. That from this data, is there a way in which you can sort of understand, or how we could understand the quality of adjudication that has sort of, has been affected over time? Possible, what are your sort of thoughts on that?
Could you repeat that, please? Quality of?
Adjudication. So the kind of judgments that are delivered, sort of what are the ratios that are taken over time, with this change in composition, this sort of, you're talking about the homogenization during some decades, representation is going in a different way. How has this affected the quality of judgments that come out of the Supreme Court? Is there a trend that we can see? How would we measure this, in fact? Like, how would you recommend to measure this?
This is strictly based on my with my understanding of what is out there at present, right? Unfortunately, we still do not have data sets which provide you with a measurement of the quality of the adjudication. We have data sets which do tell you about whether a particular judge is more pro-government, post or anti-government, and things like that. But I'm sure there are, for example, right now I myself am working on a couple of data sets like that. See, the problem is in India, this process of having data about judges of any kind, starting from their background to their voting records and everything, is fairly new. As in, this is right now just starting to get streamlined. So we still, to my knowledge, we still do not have data on the quality of adjudication, right? But we do have data on quantity. For example, I saw a data set released by Vidhi, right, which dealt with the workload of Supreme Court judges in the first month of pandemic in April 2020, if I'm not wrong. And they compared April 2019 with 2020 and tried to look at, how much work the judges are doing. So right now we have really good data sets which can tell us how much work the judges are doing, right? Which we can link better with issues of pendency, which we can link better with issues of why some judges are, preferred over others while making appointments. But to my knowledge, I haven't yet seen a data set which can, give us a measurement of quality of the judgments, right? Whether the, it's already there in other jurisdictions. For example, in USA, you'll find judgments scored on how conservative the judgment is or how liberal the judgment is, right? So they have ideological scores as well. But right now in India, as of now, we don't have something like that, to my knowledge.
Hi, can I add on something to that train of thought? Because I had a question also related to that. I am Apurva Vishwanath. I work with the Indian Express.
Go ahead, Apurva.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Go ahead, Apurva.
Yeah. So I think the other, Rangan, when you mentioned that we don't have data sets that determine like, how conservative or how liberal a judge is, one of the issues there really is because in India, we have a very different notion of somebody being a conservative or a liberal judge. For example, they might be, on electoral reforms or certain issues like that. They might take a very progressive, transparency oriented stand. But with something like, a divorce case or even we've seen a lot of these abortion cases in the Supreme Court, right? So women with who go up to 20 weeks of pregnancy approaching the Supreme Court for abortion, there they could take a very conservative view. So it's very difficult to box judges in India like the way you can do in the US or other jurisdictions, because we really have such a multitude of issues that the Supreme Court deals with. It becomes difficult. But if you were to look at, some of the work that has come, which looks at very subjective factors, like Sutanuka Ray's research, which basically looks at whether incidents of riots or exposure to incidents of riots in their childhood determine how they rule in their judicial careers. If you were to look at Supreme Court and constitutional cases, can you think of any factors or any, any experiences like that which we could use for understanding how they rule on constitutional cases? Is there something that comes to your mind?
So firstly, yeah, you're correct that it's much difficult in India to put judges in ideological boxes. What I was trying to say is that, we can't replicate that particular classification which they adopt in Western countries. But, we can do other things. For example, we can score judgments on equality, gender equality, right? Whether a judgment furthered the idea of gender equality or it was a regressive step in terms of gender equality. So we don't have anything like that also, right? Which we can have. And to your basic question as to some of the factors which we can perhaps look into in terms of adjudicating on constitutional issues. Some of them is obvious, I think caste is a big factor. Unfortunately, we do not have caste data which is readily available, right? Which we can release in terms of data sets, because we need to authenticate the source from which we get data, and Supreme Court is not going to tell us the caste of judges. So caste is there for sure. But I also think, couple of things which are much more subtle, but perhaps can shed light on how judges, their attitude is shaped in India, especially, as I said, whether they're from a public school or a private school, right? Because that can show subtle differences in terms of how they appreciate the living reality, the lived experiences of people, right? Because if you come from, so essentially anything which shows that the judge had a very insulated upbringing, right? That is definitely bound to affect how they appreciate, how they appreciate facts, how they appreciate reality, how they perceive reality. For example, a couple of years ago, we had this huge uproar when the Supreme Court gave a judgment diluting the SC and ST Prevention of Atrocities Act, right? And while it might be easier for everybody to jump to the caste, that because it is a it's caste homogeneous judiciary, that there's not a lot of diversity. That's why the judiciary is caste insensitive. But I also feel it's not simply caste, as in people growing up in cities or people growing up in environments where they're insulated from the rest of the society to a great measure, right, can also play a role. And this is just, I'm ignoring, the standard gender, caste, religion, and things like that. Those are, I think, quite obvious that they have a bearing. Those are the lenses which we can use to examine how judges are likely to behave. I also feel it's, the kind of professional background that judges come from can also have a bearing. For example, I highlighted the fact about professional homogeneity in the judiciary. I thought that was an important point because I felt that our Supreme Court and our high courts are extremely lenient on the bar. Right? We all know that lawyers go on strike every now and then, but hardly ever is anybody held for contempt, right? And for going on strike, which is supposed to be something which you can be booked for contempt, right? And this idea that I got from from a book that I read abroad, that in America, that is the problem which is happening, that because most of the judges are advocates primarily and not from any other career background, they tend to favor the legal profession, or they tend to favor lawyers in an adjudication. So the first thing which came to my mind when I wrote that piece is that the next thing should be for me to look into whether these professionally homogeneous judiciary as a whole has been overly lenient about, on lawyers, right? So apart from the red flags of gender, caste, religion, and things like that, which I think is obvious, I don't need to find. These are a couple of things which I think are important, but more work needs to be done on that, as I said, which can give us a better understanding of, how the judicial mind might be working.
Purva, Avanti, did that adequately answer your questions, or do you have any follow-ups to that?
No, for me, that was great. I think that's given quite a few opportunities on how to sort of take this forward.
Yeah, and I'm taking the liberty of sharing a few articles on the site that don't squarely answer, but show angles that relate to what it is. Sorry, Apurva.
No, I think this aspect, of how many trial court judges who rise up the ranks and do end up in the Supreme Court, and how that determines their sort of, their judicial training, if at all it has a significant impact on their subsequent judgments. That's a very important variable to look at. In the recent years, at least in the last 6 years or so, we've only had one judge who has been a trial court judge. And on the, just anecdotally, you can tell that in criminal cases, she's understood, just as Justice Bhanumati, she's understood how a trial progresses, in a very good way. She's dealt with some very significant cases where the trial is happening and you would move for bail or things like that. And she understands the processes of the trial, very well. So anecdotally, that is there, but we, like a data set on that, should be able to tell us, very interesting things.
I see. Interesting. Any other questions from others in the room?
Yeah, I have one.
Thanks, Professor Rangin, for taking us through the data sets. I think one of the points that stuck for me was when you said about one of the justices who had joined in 2018, but there's no bio, or there's no information that we can understand more about his background. So I just want to understand, as citizens, is there a way where, because this information is so important, so can we request it, or is there a guideline that they need to follow after they join? And how can we make sure that this information is there in whatever time period there is, if there is?
To my knowledge, it's primarily there is no clear framework to redress issues like this. For example, I can't think of any particular forum which the Supreme Court has made available where I can say that, okay, do this, right? I may file an RTI query that, okay, give me this information about this particular judge, right? Which should be there in a standard biographical page, right? But as of now, there is no clear procedural framework which the Supreme Court has established, where we can put some kind of pressure on the court that, okay, do this, or petition the court to do this. I think the best thing that we can perhaps do is highlight this, that the fact that a judge who joined in 2018 till now doesn't have, and multiple judges, not simply one, still now don't have a biography, or many of them don't even care about giving basic details in their biography, right? They don't tell us where they did their law, for example, as in so many judges don't want to tell us which college they went to, right? When they got their bar license, right? And so many other things, right? For example, another thing which I found very interesting, which I feel judges should share about themselves, which we as citizens have right to know, is which companies have they served, right? Because it can tell us about possible conflicts of interest, which right now might be going under the radar, right? As far as I know, some other countries already do it. Like, for example, I found in Argentina, they started it in 2003, where when you're going to become a judge in the Supreme Court, you have to reveal last 8 years of client list. But it was not made public, but there was a requirement. So I think what we can do is perhaps at this time, either institutionally open up a dialogue with the Supreme Court or the collegium that these are the things that we're expecting if you're willing to do so, or else, just put public pressure, the pressure of public opinion as in, but right now, to my knowledge, there is no clear path where I can get this addressed through a formal channel.
All right. Thanks for answering that. And a related question to that is, so you mentioned that a lot of data is not available, and whatever you have shared is mostly what you got from the Supreme Court's website. Let's say, and I'm sure when you take up a research, you come across these hurdles or roadblocks. So is there a way, where the Justice Hub or the community that we are trying to, curate here, there's probably, at least we know that these are the gaps, whether you have to research about a judge or whether it's about the Supreme Court and across a particular topic, that is whether it's quality of judgments or whatever. These are the data gaps that exist, and probably then curate ideas on how we can fill them.
Could you just repeat yourself, please, Apurv? I lost you for a minute.
Yeah, so probably just what I meant was just collating the data gaps at one place. So, collectively we can work towards, like, how can the community contribute? Like, for example, if someone is doing a particular, like you said, some of these data sets can be replicated across states. And maybe, through that process, we get more ideas about creating a data standard of sort, let's say for judges or for courts. So maybe is there a way by which we can, start curating these data gaps at one place? Yeah,
so I think we can do that. We should do that. For example, one of the ideas that I discussed with Supriya, I remember, was that, for example, last couple of months, I have filed 3 RTI queries with the collegium to get some data. And I have received one query, they declined to share the information with me. The other query, they just sent me half of a page of something. I don't know. It's very difficult to make sense of what they actually sent me. And in the third query, they have given me partial data. And I was thinking that maybe we can collate this. That is, there's so many people other than me who might be, trying to, again, get data like this. And we can make a compilation of data that many people are looking for but are not getting, right? Instead of doing it individually, where it is easier for the system to turn a request down, right? Because if I now have to file an appeal, I have to manage it from here, from Cuttack, right? So it can be taken up institutionally, that we can identify that, okay, this is the kind of data so many people are looking for but are being repeatedly turned down by the system. And maybe then it can be taken up institutionally with the appropriate authority there, that, okay, can you disclose this data? And if not, why not? What are your concerns? Other than that, I also think the more we merge data sets, right, and identify what might be missing in data sets, that might be a good thing for us to do. So understand that how much of data is already there. What's happening currently is that a lot of effort is duplicated. That's why I was so happy with when Justice Hub came in, that right now most likely somebody somewhere is trying to do exactly what I did last year, right? Trying to get the same data from the same source. So I think one of the ways we can identify data gaps is first to allow people to dip into a centralized data structure where they can, access data that is already there, so that we'll have a clear idea about the data that we don't have. Right now, honestly, we have no idea what kind of data the research community actually has and what kind of data it does not have. There is no community interaction that is happening right now. So I think that might be the first step for us to have a proper audit of how much of data the research community has, which they are willing to share openly. Then we can, start identifying what is the next thing that we do. Otherwise, a lot of effort is wasted in doing the same thing which others have done earlier, right? A lot of effort is wasted in that.
It's a really valuable point and something that we can definitely take on, at least in the specific context in the coming weeks. I think that's a really immediate thing that is within all our control to sort of start doing, at least at the moment, get like, what are we really looking for? And in that context, I'd just like to, before we, we start towards closing the session, any other questions from others in the room? Or even if you have ideas on data sets you might be looking for, I think equally for us as Justice Hub, we'd be very interested to know if you are keen to look for certain data sets, or you're interested on working on some that may or may not be covered in the scope of what exists today, but it'll be really interesting for us to hear that. So even if there are angles you're working on.
I think there is one question by Arya. Is that just a conversational thing, or is it?
Yeah, I think like it relates to the question asked by Avanti before, but you can take, it will be good to take that.
So in terms of quality, I think a couple of basic things that we can start, some of the objective things that we can start looking for is, basic textual neatness of a judgment, right? I'll try to explain through an anecdote here. So when the Supreme Court gave this judgment, Chandrachud and Ramanna, right, both wrote concurring opinions that the collegium is subject to RTI, right? I think 2019 they gave this judgment. Now, as I went through the judgment, it's a fairly short judgment by the Supreme Court standards. They write like really huge judgments. There are multiple pages in Ramanna's and Chandrachud's judgments which are completely identical. Right? They are completely identical, as in there is no difference. Page by page, word by word, they're completely the same. Right? So this is like something very basic when we talk about the quality of a judgment from a very, let's say, textual or a technical perspective, that a judgment should be easy to read. It should not be overly wrong. And it should not be redundant, as in there is no need for you to write another judgment if you're not actually saying anything else. So from a technical perspective, the quality of a judgment, something that we can all do very easily actually, look at a judgment and just count the number of words that they use just to repeat sections, right? Sections which perhaps have no bearing on the overall thing. They could just perhaps give a reference of it, but for 5-6 pages, I find that they're constantly quoting one statutory provision after another. At times, you perhaps need only a 10% of those statutory provisions that you may need to refer to. So from a technical perspective, these are a couple of things which I find are, we should need to start critiquing. For example, why should Chandrachud and Ramanna write such long judgments and they're not saying anything different from each other, right? And they're just the same thing. Like on a more difficult terrain, I think quality of a judgment, it becomes highly ideological, I think. So it's difficult to just say it is bad or right and stuff like that, but we can identify the ideological leanings of a judgment. As I said, when we talk about quality, there are obviously people of all kinds. Some of us celebrated Navtesh Singh Johar, and others felt that it was the most horrendous thing to happen to India in the last 20 years. But I think when we try to talk about quality, it might be more nuanced if we talk in terms of the leanings of the judgment, right? Which way the judgment is leaning, right? Is it opening up some sectors for women and or LGBTQ, which was not there earlier? Is it strengthening a particular law? Is it weakening a particular law? Whether that strengthening of a law or weakening of a law is good or bad will depend a huge deal on where you come from, right? The same judgment where, for example, if there is a judgment today which strengthens the reservation laws, the reaction is going to be very different about the quality of that judgment depending on your social background, right? But so I think that's a very slippery slope, as in we confuse what we prefer to be qualitative and everything else to be not qualitative. So I think a better discourse might be to pinpoint the ideological leanings of a judgment. Whether you feel that ideological leaning is good or bad, that's, I think, a political question primarily. That's no longer a legal question. That's primarily a political question.
It's very useful to make the distinction between, technical ways in which to look at what quality of adjudication is and ideological ways of just assessing where their leanings are, rather than saying this is a good judgment versus a bad judgment per se. In that sense, at least from a data point of view, people can of course make arguments one way or the other. We are sort of at time, and if we don't have any more questions, what we thought we'll do, I'd just like to invite my colleague Saurabh. We've created an online forum linked to Justice Hub. Saurabh, it would be great if, because we see some of these are not conversations that can happen just now. There might be follow-up questions as each of you begin to work on these areas that you might have. And of course, we have Professor Rangeen in our community, but also many other researchers and scholars who have experience in working in certain areas more than some others. So some who have extensively looked at issues of appointment, some who have extensively looked at issues of pendency or others. And the forum can be a simple open space for you to peg your questions, and we will galvanize our community to help begin to answer, and we'll of course do more of these meetups as we go along. But I just thought it would be great if Saurabh can take 2 minutes to guide you all if you have any follow-up questions post this event, on how you can post them. Saurabh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Supriya. I'll just quickly share my screen and walk you guys through to the Justice Hub portal and the forum. If you go on Justice Hub website, what you can see here is a link to forum. And if you click on this will redirect you to the Justice Hub forum, which is built on a advanced platform called Discourse. What you will be able to see is there are several categories of conversations that we can have on this platform. Particularly relevant for this particular session is the date with data. And once you go on date with data, you will be able to see that there are posts. This particular one is on the judges appointments data set, where you can go and you will be able to start discussing. Now, in the meantime, while Professor Rangeen was talking about different insights that can be gathered, what I have done is I have collated all these resources which were shared on the chat. So now what all of you can do is you can just quickly sign up on the Justice Hub platform, arrive at the forum and reach this particular thread and start discussing some of these things. Other than the dates with data category, what we have here is are like other categories, for example, data requests. So if you are really looking for certain kind of data, you can let the entire community know by just going to the data request, creating a new topic, and just giving us the details of what is it that you are looking for. Similarly, what you can do, there are other threads that you can really come to. So if you are using Justice Hub and you find out that there are some really cool features that you would like the hub to have, you can post your suggestions on ideas and suggestions thread. As well as if you're working on something really, really interesting, I think the community would love to know about that. So please go to share your work and share any pieces of like work in progress or something that you have done in this particular thread by creating a new topic. So this is a very quick demo of the forum. But as we start using it and as we start engaging on it, I think the features of this particular platform will allow us to work like really collaboratively, and like will accelerate the progress that each one of us are individually and collectively are making. So that was just a very quick 2-minute intro to forum. Over to you, Supriya. Supriya, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. But again, the idea is basically we harvest not just the data sets, but the knowledge that's also in the community to figure some of these questions we have. Some of you have raised some of them, but we are sure that that there are a lot that emerge across different themes. We are all ears in terms of other data sets you might want to explore, other conversations you might like to have with the community around ideas you have. So the Date with Data is one way of doing it in terms of walking through a set of data and like looking at questions you have. But we would love to hear any other suggestions you have in terms of conversations you'd like to have with each other in the community. So we hope you found this session valuable on a Saturday evening. We really, really appreciate all of you coming in. Please do stay safe and well. I think it would be great if you can just give us quick feedback so we also learn how to do this better as we continue to grow these sessions. So it'd be great if each of you can just take a second to give us your feedback. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Rangin. It was, I learned a lot through this hour. So really, really appreciate you taking this time out. And really, I think the immediate next step we have for sure is working around the data gap itself. But an equal invitation to the rest of the community, if you have interesting existing or related data sets, please do share it. We're sure that many others who are working on this would find it valuable. And any other ideas on how you think we should be improving Justice Hub?
Thanks a lot, Supriya, for having me, and thank you everybody for, as Supriya said, sitting through this on a Saturday evening. So it's really nice to know that there are people out there who are looking to work on these particular lines of inquiry about the judicial system. So it has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody, and have a good rest of the week and weekend.